Welcome to the Pat White Show. Well, shortly after midnight on Friday night, the 4th of July, violence broke out in downtown Fort Wayne. It's right there over near the landing, Pearl and Harrison Street. Four young people were shot, and one of them sadly passed away. Now, police were able to finally find who was involved with this, or the shooters, if you will. Turns out it was a 16-year-old boy and an 18-year-old by the name of Deshaun Jackson. Now, the 16-year-old's been charged with murder, attempted murder, and unlawful possession of a firearm. And you're saying to yourself, what's a 16-year-old doing with a firearm? And we'll chat about that in just a moment. The 18-year-old, Deshaun Jackson, who lives over in the apartment complex at 1400 block of Woodhaven Drive. Well, he's been charged with attempted murder and recklessness with a weapon. Now, you say, well, what is going on here? Well, let me tell you what happens with gangs, folks. Young men who maybe have just not a father in the family. It's one of those situations, a single mother trying to raise kids, and they have a young man, and there's no father in the house. Well, they start looking for a father figure. And more often than not, they find it with an older person, usually the head of a gang, who they admire and respect, and that becomes their, well, for lack of a better term, father figure. And they follow them. And whatever the father figure tells them to do, they do. Now, someone who is smart and understands the law, the 18-year-old kid, and Deshaun Jackson apparently did, understood that, hey, I'm an 18, I'm an adult, but if I'm going to shoot somebody, make sure the gun's in the hand of a 16-year-old because he is technically a juvenile. And juvenile, well, they go to juvie hall. They don't necessarily go to prison unless, of course, their charges upgraded because of what happened. Now, why is all this going on? Well, recently, the chief of the police department, downtown Fort Wayne, put out a note and said, hey, you parents have got to do something about this. You parents have got to step up and you got to watch your kids. Well, that's all well and good. But in many cases, we're dealing with single parent households here. Mother, she's just doing the best she can, surviving. The kids don't have a father. And when they don't have a father, they're going to look for a father figure somewhere. And usually it's somebody in a gang. And usually that's how they get involved. And once they get involved that way, well, the end is not very good, folks. So, coming out and saying, hey, you parents, you need to do it with your kids. Well, some of these folks simply say, can't do it. Aren't able to do it. Just, it isn't the way life hands them things to them. They don't have the ability to do that. They didn't necessarily want to have kids in the first place, but they do. May have more than one kid, who knows? But this is how kids become part of gangs. Because there is no father figure. And you can check on these kids to see if there is a father figure, because normally a father figure, as a rule, will be setting down the law saying, the kid, you don't be doing that. But if there is none, things can happen. This doesn't make way to say, hey, that's perfectly okay, can't do anything about it. Yes, you can. Police will try to mentor, people will try to mentor. Folks in schools will try to save these kids from going down the wrong way. But it's very difficult to do. When a young man is looking for someone to look up to and respect, and they find it the wrong person, a lot of times that leads to a very bad ending. Now, they discovered when they went to the apartment or the home where Deshaun Jackson lived, other weapons. That's right, other weapons were found in the home of Deshaun Jackson. Are they legal weapons? 18-year-olds cannot own guns. Sorry, ain't gonna happen. Most likely they were stolen. And maybe they could track down who owns them, track down when they were stolen or what have you. That's my guess. Can't guarantee I'm correct. But multiple weapons in the home of an 18-year-old kid, that tells you that's probably a gang leader. But the gang leader's smart. Give the gun to somebody else. Give the gun to a younger person. Let them be the one pulling the trigger. Based on the information that I have from the various sources that I go to, that's apparently what happened. Will this happen again in Fort Wayne? Sadly, I believe it will, because until you solve the problem of kids looking for a father figure or looking for someone to respect, or having a father watching over a kid and saying, you don't do this, it's going to continue. It's just the way it is. Doesn't make it right. But unfortunately, the world we live in today has some very, very unfortunate situations. And what you saw downtown was one of those. I hate to say it. I'm just worried about the next time it happens. Gang versus gang. That never ends up good. Just saying. Well, I'd like to step away from politics for a few minutes and talk to you about something that happened down in South Texas. And I can talk about this because I'm from Texas and I've seen some of this stuff happen. Well, it turns out down in South Texas, they have an area called the Hill Country. And it's just hill area, but it's kind of a place where a lot of people like to go vacation in those particular areas. They got trees and green and what have you. And there's many camps and RV camps and things like that, kids camp. One in particular is called the Mystic Camp. Mystic Camp's been around since, well, I think they're almost 100 years old. And I remember the gentleman who purchased it back in the 1970s. Can't remember his last name, but get to that in a moment. But anyway, there are all these kids camps. Parents send their kids down there in the middle of summer because, well, it's a little bit cooler, it's nicer, and it's not the typical Texas plain and desert area you seem to think about. Like I said, it's in the Texas Hill Country. Well, that storm that came up in the middle of the night. And unless you've seen one of these things happen, unless you understand how they happen and things come together in just the right situation, you don't understand what can happen down there when a big rainstorm hits all of a sudden. I remember back in 1995, I was attending a high school class reunion in my hometown. And at the event place we were having it, we got hit with a storm that happened that night. We got 5 inches of rain in a matter of minutes. The power in El Paso went down. I mean, everything went dark. There's so much rain hit because 3 fronts came together at one time. And I mean, it came down and flooded the entire city. And El Paso does not handle a lot of water that well, as most Texas doesn't. You see a lot of arroyos down in Texas, a lot of empty gullies, they look like. You say, what's that for? Well, that's when the monsoons hits. When the monsoons hits, you never know what's going to happen. And the one that hit down there in South Texas killed a lot of people, especially at these camps. There was one Coast Guard individual. He's a swimmer, saved 160 kids. A lot of kids died. This is not the first storm, folks, that's happened down in that area. They had one back in 1987. It was just as damaging. It does happen. Right conditions have to happen, but it does happen. Now, people said that some areas of the area flooding went up from 0 feet to 30 feet of flooding. 30 feet. And that happened in about an hour. So going from dry land to 30 feet of water in an hour, that's Texas for you when the fronts come together. One place was saying they were seeing about it was going up 1 foot per minute. I mean, you can't control that. Now there are people out there saying, "Oh, the current administration canned all the weather people." Folks, that's BS, complete BS. They knew weather was coming out there, just nobody knew how bad it was going to be, and there was no way to predict it. People were advised of it, but this sucker hit like 4 o'clock in the morning. And that Camp Mystic in particular is in a canyon. Well, water will come down and water will all go into a canyon. And believe me, until you've seen it happen, it happens. I used to see those when I was living in Arizona. The arroyos would fill with water, and you go, where did it come from? And it happens real fast. But desert doesn't absorb water very easily. Water just starts running, and it goes. Mother Nature's going to take it where it's going to go. It had nothing to do with forecasters or anything else. They knew what was going on. They knew there was a chance that these fronts could come together. You can't predict the weather. Now, a lot of kids were killed, and that's really sad. There were kids killed who were from the members of the Kansas City Chiefs ownership. People down in Texas are flocking down there to offer help, to offer money. The teams are putting up millions of dollars. The volunteer center had to shut down because they got too many people helping. Now think about that. People down there want to help. They're giving money. They're bringing stuff in. They are doing everything possible they can. And if you take a look at the pictures, before and after pictures, and see how it looks. But don't blame this on administration. Say, oh, they canned all the weather people. No, BS. I'm from down there. I don't need to be challenged on that. I've seen it. Like I said, this happened in 1987. And the gentleman who owned that camp, Mystic Camp, he died trying to rescue kids. That's how much he cared. Put his own life on the line. Getting 30 feet of water in a minute, in an hour, 30 feet, go from 0 to 30 feet an hour. Trust me, folks. When you get in a canyon like that and all the water comes down, that can happen. I'm just passing this along to you so you understand, and don't be saying, well, it's the fault of this administration or this person or whatever. Nah. Those happen down there. That's hill country. That's Texas. And it's happened before. Can it happen again? Yes. Do they need maybe different warning systems? Possibly. But what happened in the middle of the night happened in the middle of the night. And nobody was ready for what happened. It's just how it worked out. Now you understand. If you want to volunteer or send money, that's your cause. But understand, we know what it is. It does happen. And welcome to the hill country of South Texas. Well, everybody knows about the big, beautiful tax bill that was signed into law on the 4th of July by the president. And the big thing about it is it lowers your taxes. Not right now, because your taxes were lowered back in 2017, the last time Trump was in office. But those taxes were due to go back up because there was a sunset on those taxes. And that sunset has now been eliminated. Those taxes are permanent. So at least your taxes aren't going up to the tune of $4 trillion next year. That's thing number one. You may not know about that bill. Here's something else you might not know about it. This allows you to have your personalized medical savings accounts. So now you can control your money that you're using for your medical savings, medical accounts. You can personalize it, make your own. Gives you new rules set up out of this. Something that now you can control your healthcare costs with your own personalized account. And here's something else going on. The bill says, we've got a lot of acres in America. Those acres are not being used for anything. They're just sort of sitting there. It turns out there's a lot of stuff under the ground. Minerals, things we're buying from other countries like Russia, China, and maybe some other places you don't want to know about. Well, bill says we can start mining and doing things in our own country. Find stuff to keep us self-sufficient. All right? Let's move on to something else you might want to know about. Back in the Biden era, he was telling the people who had student loans, racked them up for stupid degrees, and he said, hey, the American taxpayer will pay your loan. You don't have to pay for it. Well, obviously, that was not right, not correct, telling people like me that I got to pay somebody else's loan. I don't think so. Well, the new law says, you people who bought the loans, you're going to pay the loans, and you're going to start paying them right now. So that whole law about giving freebies to people ain't happening, folks. Ain't happening. And here's something else that ain't happening. Remember the Amendment Green New Deal? No, that was the Green New Scam. That's dead. It's been eliminated by this bill. So now you are going to be able to buy the car that you want to buy, because the laws were going to change that said every car made had to be made an electric vehicle. Well, electric vehicles turned out to be a joke, and everybody's getting rid of them, saying this is the stupidest idea we ever came up with. Well, now we're going to find different ways to power our cars. And yes, we're going to use fossil fuels, but other stuff is coming. It's just the electric car was a bad idea from the get-go, and now the concept is dead. All right, here's something else in the bill you didn't know about. All the big universities like Harvard, Yale, and all those big Ivy schools, they all have these huge endowment funds. People donate money to them. Corporations donate money to them. I mean, billions of dollars of donations. Well, guess what? This new bill requires that an 8% tax is now going to be levied on those universities and their billion-dollar donation accounts. They're going to start paying taxes just like everybody else does on that $1 billion they've got soaked up in the bank somewhere that people are donating to them. Now they get a chance to pay their own way, and we call that fair taxation. And here's the last thing. They have changed the rules on the requirements for Medicaid. Because now, if people want to be on Medicaid, they're going to have to go out and work for it or apply to work for it. And any kinds of jobs, you're going to have to go out and work at least 80 hours a month. That's not a week, it's 80 hours a month. And it could be in public service sort of things, working for corporate, some companies, 501c3s, or nonprofit companies, doing things for good companies, Salvation Army, those kind of things. Work for companies that are doing good for society to earn your 80 hours so that you get your free Medicaid. No longer it's a freebie, folks. Now, if you are disabled legally, that doesn't affect you. But people who are sitting around doing nothing and getting it for free, now they're going to have to earn it. And they've also changed the rules on SNAP, the food stamp. Things you can buy with the government dollars, that's been changed too. So now you know, bunch of big things. It isn't just the no tax on tips, no tax on your overtime, or no tax on Social Security. Yeah, those are big things. But the other things underneath it, that's what makes the big, beautiful bill the big, beautiful bill. Things are happening that should raise the economic outlook of this country. The GDP should be up over 3%. And that should start paying down the debt. And if Congress can keep their hands out of other people's pockets and not spend like drunken sailors, keep within the budget, the deficit will go down. That's part of the big, beautiful tax bill. And now you understand what happened. And now you understand why it is the big, beautiful tax bill. Well, in case you haven't heard, the House Oversight Committee, as headed up by the Republicans, are conducting a hearing to find out what was going on in the Biden administration and was he capable of actually serving. And if he wasn't, what was going on and who was running the rodeo while he was unable to serve. One of the people they called today was his doctor. His name was Kevin O'Connor. He was called in for a closed door, not an open door for the public to see, closed door hearing. And in that hearing and in that committee meeting, they were going to ask him questions. Well, according to the head of the committee, Congressman Comer, he said, ask the guy two questions. First question was, have you ever been told about to lie about the president's health? That was question number one. He said, Kevin O'Connor, Dr. O'Connor, immediately invoked the Fifth Amendment. And he said, my second question was, did you ever see Joe Biden to be unfit to execute his duties? To which again, he once again said, I take the Fifth Amendment. Every question he was asked, according to the members of the committee who were inside, he took the fifth. Now, his attorney said, hey, he's got a right to take the fifth. He doesn't want to anything a doctor-patient relationship. Treating a patient, can't talk about that. That's sacred. Well, wait a minute. The question was, have you ever told a lie about the president's health? Were you told a lie? That's really not violating any oath in there about treating the president. Ask the question, were you ever told to lie? He took the fifth. Now, taking the fifth is American, tradition. It's in there. You could take it. And the Supreme Court says that you can take it if you want to because, you don't want to be put into something, a bad situation where you may, in fact, be guilty of something, or you don't want to be involved in something where someone could be guilty of something. Take that any way you choose. The problem is that if witnesses start taking the fifth, and my guess is that's probably what's going to be happening in the future. They have subpoenaed a whole bunch of people, one of whom was the chief of staff of the First Lady, Joe Biden. He's essentially said, I ain't going to show up. Now, they may subpoena him. And if he rejects the subpoena and says, I'm still not showing up, could he be taken to court? Well, he could be referred to the Justice Department, who then could, bring charges against him and put him in jail. It happened to people in the Trump administration some time back. Now, are other people going to take the fifth? My guess is possibly. They may, in fact, do that because the more people they call in, the more people who are going to be called asked to answer questions. Now, if anybody remembers the back in the days of the Watergate hearing of the Nixon administration, this goes back into the early 70s. Those hearings were held in public. People would see what was going on. People would see who were asked the questions. And eventually one person broke. And that opened the floodstream. Now, Nixon had to resign ultimately, not because necessarily anything of what he did, but the cover-up of the entire situation. That's what got Nixon basically canned, for lack of a better term. That's what happened. I mean, even his own party said, hey, we can't support you on this one. And they couldn't. So where do we stand? Well, right now, the House Oversight Committee, with no Democrats participating because they don't want any part of this, they're trying to bring in people to ask them questions. And right now, we have found out the plan du jour for all the people being called in is apparently to take the fifth. Only one lady has been called in, and she answered a lot of the questions. But she is the low-hanging fruit. She's an underling. She said, I just did what I was told to do, and that's what I did. Didn't say who told you to do it. So what we're going to find out, well, anyone else come out and speak the truth? Probably not. But as things get tighter and tighter, someone may be forced to have to say something they don't want to say for fear of what could happen to them if they don't. Now, the other side of that is the fear of what could happen to them if they do. It's a very tight quandary, folks. And right now, Congress is trying to figure out what exactly happened in the Biden administration. And ultimately, was the use of the auto pen a forgery in the real sense of the term? Something to think about, folks. And the hearings aren't done, and let's see what they continue. But I'm guessing the Fifth Amendment is going to be the word du jour for the next few months. Let's just watch. You know, if you follow things happening on TV, you're probably wondering to yourself, what is going on with the Jeffrey Epstein case? Now, a perfectly good question, but are there answers? Now, you remember a few years back, he was arrested, put into jail, and then suddenly cameras quit working. People were not there watching him, and they said he killed himself, committed suicide. You're going, what? Could that really happen? Well, now the FBI says, oh, yeah, he killed himself. It was suicide. But a lot of questions were still unanswered. His lady friend, Ghislaine Maxwell, and I'm using lady friend probably pretty loosely, well, she was put on trial. She's in jail, but she's not telling anybody anything. How much does she know? Probably a lot. She's not saying a word to anybody. Well, then everybody was saying, hey, what's the information on this? What about all the tapes? What about all the logs? What about all the things that we've heard about? What about his island out there and all the people that were coming out saying, yes, I was kidnapped or I was brought into sex trafficking? What about all that stuff that happened? Well, everybody figured when Donald Trump got into office that he was going to get to the bottom of this. And frankly, he said he was going to get to the bottom of this. Pam Bondi became the Attorney General. And in February, she said, the Epstein client list is sitting on my desk right now for review. The Epstein client list. Well, apparently, that so-called client list are people on the logs of the airplanes and flying wherever he went. Trouble is, you can't convict people on being on his airplane. I don't know what he did on the airplane, but just being on there doesn't convict you. And there were some big names on those airplanes. I mean, Bill Gates and, well, frankly, a whole lot more, among others. Well, all right. So Pam Bondi says, we've got the client list. And then they're talking about all the videos and stuff. Going to get that information out. Well, recently, Pam Bondi came out and said this. She said, there's no Epstein client list and no further disclosure of Epstein-related material would be appropriate or warranted. Now, I don't know how you read that. Would be appropriate or warranted. What's that mean? Can't do it? We don't want to do it? There's something in there we can't talk about? You know, a lot of people in this country are saying, something ain't right here. Something don't smell right. But is it something that going on that Jeffrey Epstein was involved that I don't know, may have higher political problems? Is he involved in the government some way? What are all the things that he was involved in that nobody knows about? Yes, he was involved with a whole lot of stuff. A whole lot of people were around him. A whole lot of people visited his property. But has the FBI decided to bury this? Is Pam Bondi saying we got to bury this? Is Dan Bongino saying we got to bury this? So the fact of the matter is, are people in the FBI saying, yeah, we know stuff, but we can't talk about it because what it could cause if the word got out? You know, this is sort of like that what happened with the Kennedy assassination. They said it was Lee Harvey Oswald. Well, now we're finding out not so fast, folks. Maybe it wasn't. But all the people who are involved are all dead now. Can't go after dead people, can you? So there's kind of where we stand. You know, the FBI has all kinds of documentation and data. What are they doing with it? They got the Jeffrey Epstein videotapes. We don't know what's on those. They've got the laptops from people like Seth Rich, Uma Aberdeen, even Hunter Biden's laptop. All those things are on there, but nobody knows anything what's there. Why is the government keeping secrets? Why is it so important that it doesn't come out? Or why do people feel like it can't be handled by the American public? The same might be said of space flights, people coming in from outer space. You know, you watch the movie Independence Day, the president said, well, he was given, he had deniability because he didn't know what certain things were going on. So he had deniability. I didn't know what was going on, he could say. Well, do we really know that there's something out there? But maybe, just maybe, the politicians and the people in charge say, America can't handle this. And maybe that's the gist of the entire problem. The reason why we don't know anything, the reason why we're not told everything is because the feeling is the America can't handle it because it would be that devastating to society. Can't guarantee that, and can't say it is or it isn't. But I'm telling you right now, a lot of people feel betrayed, and they feel that something was done, and they're not allowed to know it. And for that, the conspiracy theories will continue, and people will continually say, why didn't you tell us? Maybe after everybody's gone, someone will finally pull up the numbers and take a look and say, whoa, this was happening. But right now, we aren't allowed to know anything. And that's the problems that we're dealing with society. Society is being kept in the dark. And you know what? In the long run, I'm not sure that's a good thing. Well, good afternoon, class, and welcome to History 101. This is where we teach you something you probably didn't know about history. And for this particular session, we're going to be talking about McDonald's. Well, not just McDonald's, the McDonald's Filet-o-Fish sandwich. You wonder where it came from? Well, here's your history. Start taking notes. Way back in the 1960s, McDonald's was not a big-time restaurant. Matter of fact, it was overshadowed by 70 different restaurants back at that age. And McDonald's were just getting started, but they were making it available to people who wanted to buy a franchise in their city. And for a certain amount of money, you could buy a franchise and start your own McDonald's in your town. A gentleman by the name of Lou Groen decided to invest everything he had buying his first McDonald's franchise in Cincinnati, Ohio. Well, something he learned. He said during the Lenten season, suddenly people weren't coming into McDonald's to buy his hamburgers. Why? Well, during the Lenten season, some people decided to give up meat for Lent. And then, of course, back in those days in the 60s, couldn't eat meat on Friday if you happen to be Catholics. Turns out, apparently, there were a lot of Catholics down in the Cincinnati area back in those days. And Mr. Groen was concerned because he thought, man, my restaurant's not going to make it. Can't sell food on Friday because people don't eat meat. So he got concerned and said, wonder if I could make fish. So he said, hey, that might be a good idea. But with McDonald's, you got to take it up to the big head office. Back in those days, it was Ray Kroc. Had to go up and meet with Ray Kroc and said, here's an idea I have. Well, he pitched the idea to Mr. Kroc. Mr. Kroc says, no, man, fish is going to make my restaurant smell like fish. We're a burger joint. Well, Mr. Groen was somewhat dejected. But after he left, the staff around Mr. Kroc says, hey, Mr. Kroc, you got to understand, a lot of Catholics out there can't eat meat on Friday. They have Lent. Can't be done. So he thought about it. And he said, oh, well, okay. How about we have a test? So I've got an idea for something new to add to the menu. We'll test it against Groen's idea for a fish sandwich. They did. And they went to a number of restaurants around the United States and had test runs done. People could choose whether they wanted this or that or whatever. So they tested out a number of restaurants, and it turns out when the test was done, 350 people chose the fish sandwich, and 6 chose the sandwich that Mr. Kroc had created. Now you're saying, wait a minute, what did he create? He created what he called the hula sandwich. Yep, that's what it was called. The hula sandwich at McDonald's. What was a hula sandwich? A slice of pineapple that would have been grilled on one of their grills, and you slap it on a bun, you put a slice of cheese on top, and you serve it instead of a meat. That was the hula sandwich that Mr. Ray Kroc came up with against Mr. Groen's fish sandwich. Mr. Groen had 350, Ray Kroc had 6. Well, obviously the hula went away. The fish sandwich didn't. Then the concern was, well, how do we get fish in here so we can have it taken care of? Turns out there's fishing fleets in the northern areas. The fish they were looking for is pollock. Pollock is the main fish in the McDonald's fish sandwich. Turns out there were a fleet of fishing that had huge, big boats. On the top part of the boat, they would haul in the pollock. Down the bottom part of the boat was a complete factory, cutting up the fish, gutting it, cleaning it up, and literally cutting it into squares, packing it in boxes, and freezing it right there on the ship. So by the time the ship hit the dock, they got the fresh food. It was done. So that's how the old fish sandwich got started at McDonald's. Now, is it healthy? Well, it's got 390 calories. It's got 16 grams of protein. And it turns out it is one of the most popular sandwiches at McDonald's, especially on Friday, especially during Lent, and when people want something other than a hamburger. So now you know the fish sandwich got its start in Cincinnati, Ohio, at a franchise owned by Mr. Lou Groen, who proposed fish, and Ray Kroc decided he wanted to have a hula burger, pineapple, grilled on a bun with a slab of cheese. Which would you eat? Now you know the history of the fish sandwich at McDonald's, and that's it for today's class lecture. There will be a test. Well, what do you say we talk about something that's a little more on the lighter side and maybe you will find amusing? Turns out that a new restaurant has just opened up at the Villages down in Florida. You know, Villages, that place for people retired to go to. Big place, a lot of stuff going on. Huge facility. It's located about 45 miles northwest of Orlando. Well, a new restaurant just opened, and guess what it is? Well, the new restaurant at the Villages, Hooters. That's right, a Hooters has opened up in the Villages in Orlando, and it was packed. People have been wanting it down there, and it was filled to the rafters. People were standing in line waiting to get in this morning. They all wanted to get into a Hooters. And why? You know, I really can't tell you. I don't know what the attraction of a Hooters is in the Villages group, the older people, retired folks, but apparently they liked it. And the guy who owns it is a guy named Neil Kiefer. Neil was the original guy that set up the Hooters restaurants back in 1983. And obviously they got bought out by big national companies. And frankly, the restaurants turned into, well, any place you want to take the wife and kids, I can guarantee you. So he says, no, we're going to bring it back to a class restaurant where the women look more like athletes and the uniforms more look like athletes, not rather than a cheap Vegas strip show, for crying out loud. Said, we're going to make it look at a class. And he and his wife, because it ain't just him, he and the missus are turning Hooters back into what he feels is a respectable restaurant. When the bankruptcy gets finished, he plans to take over about 30% of the restaurants that used to exist in the major markets and bring it back with class and style. And the favorite thing at Hooters was their chicken wings. So, if you happen to be down in Orlando anytime soon and you decide you want to go check out a Hooters, believe it or not, you're going to be able to find one in the Villages. And be warned, though, you may have to stand in line and wait because everybody else in the Villages seems to want to go to Hooters themselves. Who knew that a Hooters would be the most popular restaurant in the Villages just outside of Orlando? Doesn't that put a smile on Granddad's face? I'm sure it does. Happy